But I have to remind you, the quest that I am taking is an A-rank difficulty. And by looking at your badge, you seem to be a newcomer since your bronze, Inigo said, gesturing subtly to the token hanging from her neck. I could say the same thing to you, Lyra countered smoothly, her eyes flicking toward the bronze badge hanging off his own chest. He gave a half-smile. Yeah, but I have combat experience. I can take care of myself. I can take care of myself too. Don't worry, she replied, her tone even calm. I won't drag you down. There was no arrogance in her voice, just confidence, controlled and sharp like the string of the longbow on her back. Inigo studied her again, more closely this time. Her cloak was travel-worn but neatly kept. The way she carried herself was subtle, efficient, no wasted movement. Her gloves were well used, the fingertips stained faintly from resin or sap. And though her quiver wasn't stuffed full, the arrows that were there were handmade, fletched by someone who knew what they were doing. I suppose we're both risking it, he muttered. Might as well risk it together. She inclined her head slightly. Agreed. They returned to the counter. Elise looked up from her paperwork, and when she saw Lyra next to Inigo, her brows rose. I take it you found someone? She asked, lips quirking into a faint smile. Yeah, Inigo replied. This is Lyra. She's joining me for the kobold extermination. Elise's eyes moved to the elf, giving her a quick once-over, not judging, just measuring. Do you have a guild registration? Elise asked politely. Lyra nodded and retrieved a small folded parchment from her belt pouch, placing it gently on the counter. Elise scanned the document and hummed. You recently joined, making you a bronze rank. I don't think the two of you will be enough to handle the quest. You can either find another or look for more members. I don't think anyone around this guild would join our party, Inigo said, tapping his clenched fist on the counter with a minimal force. I know, there was a waiver I signed when I took that goblin quest. It was a C-rank quest. How about we sign that waiver, so the guild won't be responsible for any mishaps that may occur in our mission? Sounds good. Elise's lips thinned. She clearly didn't like it, but she didn't shut it down either. Her eyes drifted between Inigo and Lyra, calculating the risk, the paperwork, and perhaps the headache it might cause her later. You're seriously going to attempt an A-rank kobold extermination, she said slowly. With just the two of you? I've seen worse, Inigo replied. Lyra crossed her arms. I have too. Elise exhaled through her nose, clearly not convinced but out of options. Fine, she muttered. Don't say I didn't try to talk you out of it. She reached under the counter and retrieved a black folder, flipping it open and pulling out a thin sheet of parchment with pre-inscribed runes along the edges. It was the waiver, an Adventurers Guild liability release form, intended for foolhardy missions that didn't meet proper safety protocols. I'm required to explain this in full, Elise said, setting the form between them. By signing this, the guild relinquishes all responsibility should anything happen to either of you. No rescue parties. No life insurance claims. If your corpses are found, or not, you will not be counted among the protected. Inigo nodded. Understood. Understood, Lyra echoed. Elise handed them each a feather quill and ink vial. Sign at the bottom. Full name. Blood signature optional, but preferred for confirmation. Inigo signed first, Inigo Velasquez, his handwriting crisp and steady. Blood signature? There was none when I signed one. I won't do a blood signature. Lyra followed. She hesitated only for a second before writing out her full name in elegant script. Lyra Artheniel. Elise took both forms and scanned them, then pressed the guild's seal onto the lower right corner of each. A quick magical flicker confirmed their registration. She sighed again and slid 2 stamped quest slips across the desk. It's your funeral. Nice to know you care, Inigo said, slipping his slip into his satchel. I do, Elise replied dryly. Which is why I'm not smiling. He smirked. We'll bring back results. I'm sure you will. Just don't bring back pieces of yourselves. Lyra gave a curt nod. We'll be back. Thank you for accommodating our request. Good luck, Elise said, the words sounding more like a quiet prayer than encouragement. As the two turned away from the counter, the guild hall seemed to quiet just a bit around them. Adventurers glancing their way, some whispering, others shaking their heads. You feel that? Inigo muttered as they pushed through the doors and back into the sunlight. The weight of low expectations. I don't care about anyone's expectations. Oh, Inigo whistled softly. She is the type of girl in the anime who is quiet but cold and skillful. Would she live up to his expectations? It will be answered once they reach the site. Exiting the Adventurers Guild, Inigo remembered Lyra saying that this was personal. He wondered what that was. Miss Lyra, mind if I ask you some questions? Lyra glanced sideways at him, the hood still shadowing most of her face, though the tip of one pointed ear twitched. You may ask, she replied calmly. Whether I answer is another matter. Inigo chuckled. Fair enough. They walked in sync now, boots tapping against the cobbled stone of the street as they made their way toward the city's eastern gate. I was just wondering, Inigo began, what you said earlier, that you had your reasons for taking this quest. Personal ones. What's that about? There was a pause, long enough that he wondered if she'd ignore it entirely. But after a few steps more, she spoke. A month ago, Lyra said quietly, a merchant caravan traveling through East Hallow Hills was attacked by a group of organized kobolds. Only one survivor. The others were either killed or taken. One of them was my cousin. Inigo's casual expression sharpened slightly. Taken. That's what the survivor said. They didn't just kill everyone outright. Some were dragged into the mines. So you joined me in hopes of finding your cousin? Do you have a problem with that? I don't have a problem with it. It's just that I am now understanding why this mission is personal to you. She simply nodded and looked ahead, telling him that she is not interested in talking to him for longer. Still, he is partnered with an elf girl, a real elf girl, and with a glance he could tell that she is one of those jade beauties. This is going to be exhilarating. So, what do you do, Sir Inigo? Inigo would do just fine. So what is the question specifically? I mean, I don't see any weapons on you. Are you a mage or something? But typically a mage would have a staff or a magic tome. So you were curious about my weapons and abilities, huh? That's understandable, given that we are undertaking such a dangerous quest. I am a marksman. Marksman. Lyra tilted her head to the side. Similar to mine? I am an archer and am related to marksman, but the weapons. Where are you hiding it? It can't be helped. You are too curious about my weapons. Very well, I will show you. Inigo sighed before materializing a desert eagle in his right hand. That's your weapon? Lyra's eyes scanned the pistol on Inigo's hand and couldn't quite picture what it could do. How does it work? You might want to cover your ears, Inigo said, raising the desert eagle slightly, finger resting safely along the frame, not the trigger. Lyra arched an eyebrow but did as told, cupping her hands lightly over her pointed ears. Inigo turned to the open field beside the dirt path they were walking and aimed at a half-rotted wooden signpost in the distance, maybe 20 meters out. The shot echoed through the still morning like a thunderclap. Birds scattered from nearby trees. The signpost splintered into pieces, the top half spinning through the air before crashing into a bush. Lyra flinched at the sound but quickly removed her hands and stared, wide-eyed, at the damage. That was loud, she muttered, blinking. Inigo smirked and lowered the weapon. Loud but effective. Lyra stepped forward and examined the remains of the post, her expression serious. It pierced clean through. No arrow I've ever loosed did that kind of damage at that range. She looked back at him. What kind of bow is that? Inigo chuckled. It's not a bow. It's called a gun. From where I come from, it's fairly common. This one's called a Desert Eagle. Fires high-caliber rounds. Hits harder than it looks. Lyra tilted her head slightly again, curiosity flaring behind her calm demeanor. From where you come from? Inigo realized his slip and cleared his throat. Let's just say I'm not local. Long story. Another realm? She asked plainly, as if that kind of thing wasn't impossible in a world where elves and kobolds existed. Maybe. He shrugged, neither confirming nor denying. She didn't press. I see. Well, I suppose that explains the weapon. Still, what about ammunition? I have enough, Inigo said simply. And if I run out, I have other means. He flipped the gun once in his hand before dematerializing it back into his inventory. Let's just say I'm equipped for prolonged combat. Lyra nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then we should work on synergy. I take it you'll be covering from mid-range. Correct. You keep to the flanks and high ground. I'll suppress anything that charges us. You pick off the ones I don't see. Understood, she replied without hesitation. My arrows are enchanted, minor elemental tags. I can alternate between flame and wind. Good. That means we won't be relying solely on raw firepower. That kind of utility can make a difference in tight spaces. Do you have explosives? She asked, glancing at him as they began walking again. He chuckled. You're asking all the right questions. I do. Flashbangs, frags, smokes. Not in large quantities, but enough to cause a stir. It's going to take long to explain. Please explain to me how those functions. I need to know so that I can prepare for it. Inigo blinked, a little surprised by her insistence. Lyra's tone wasn't demanding, just earnest, clear, and direct. She didn't want to be impressed by the tools he carried. She wanted to understand them. All right, he said with a small nod. Makes sense. We'll be trusting our lives to each other in there. They continued walking along the dirt path, the outline of the hills and the mine beyond just visible in the distance, shrouded in mist. Inigo reached into his inventory and materialized 3 items, holding them in his gloved hands. Let's start with this one. He held up a small, cylindrical metal object with a pin and a spoon lever. This is a fragmentation grenade. Frag for short. You pull the pin, throw it, and after about 4 seconds, it explodes and sends shrapnel flying in every direction. Lethal radius is roughly 5 meters. Dangerous up to 15. It's great for clustered enemies. Lyra narrowed her eyes at the device. So it's a delayed blast trap. Exactly, Inigo said. The moment you hear the pop of the spoon, it's go time. He then held up another one, white casing, slightly smaller. This is a flashbang. It's non-lethal. When it detonates, it emits a blinding flash and deafening noise. Disorients anyone in the blast radius for several seconds. I usually toss this first when clearing enclosed spaces, blind the enemy, move in while they're stunned. He flipped the last canister in his hand. It was dark and looked almost unremarkable. And this is a smoke grenade. Pops out a thick screen of smoke when activated. Great for covering a retreat, ambushing, or breaking line of sight. Lyra considered all three. So noise, shrapnel, and concealment. Your world is very direct. Efficient, Inigo corrected with a faint grin. She gave a small smile. That too. He reabsorbed the grenades back into his system with a soft digital shimmer, then turned his gaze toward the narrowing path ahead. Kobolds like to dig in and defend choke points. I'm guessing we'll encounter traps before we see the first actual fighter. Probably tripwires or pits, Lyra agreed. Maybe even magical alarms. They have shamans among their numbers sometimes. Great, he muttered. Just what I needed, kobold mages. Relax, she said dryly. Most of their magic is rudimentary. Smoke screens. Minor curses. Sometimes illusions to lure enemies into dead ends. But nothing that can't be handled with a sharp eye. Sounds like you've fought them before. I have, but never in a place this deep or this quiet. The trees thinned, and the mist grew heavier as the dirt path turned into cracked, overgrown stone slabs, remnants of an old mining trail long forgotten. Brambles clawed at their boots, and the distant call of crows echoed above, growing fainter with each step they took into kobold territory. Soon, the silhouette of the mine entrance emerged ahead, an arch of timber beams half swallowed by the hillside, their supports rotting but somehow still standing. The air here was cooler, damp, and heavy with the scent of earth and decay. There, Lyra said, pointing to faint tracks in the dirt, small, clawed footprints crisscrossing near the entrance. Kobolds. Maybe a dozen have passed through recently. Inigo knelt by the trail, eyes narrowing. Some are dragging something. Could be materials. Or bodies. He rose, brushing dust off his knee. Well then, this is it. Lyra took a deep breath, adjusting her quiver and knocking an arrow loosely on her bow. You ready? Inigo materialized his M4A1 with a quiet shimmer, checking the magazine and sighting down the barrel once. Ready. The mouth of the mine loomed like a jagged wound in the hillside, silent and foreboding. Inigo advanced first, raising his rifle as the shadows swallowed them whole. Behind him, Lyra moved with near-silent precision, her steps as light as falling leaves. The only sound between them was the faint creak of worn leather and the slow, steady click of Inigo's safety disengaging. Just inside, the mine opened into a narrow tunnel, wooden supports bowing inward with age, beams draped in old moss and spiderwebs. A lantern wouldn't have helped here. The darkness was thick and absolute. But Inigo had already tapped into his system. Night vision, active. The world turned green as his visor adjusted, bathing the tunnel in cold, artificial clarity. He could see every rock, every fracture in the timber, every worn pickaxe left behind by long-dead miners. Hold, he whispered, raising a clenched fist. Lyra froze immediately. 3 kobolds, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, shuffled toward them. They were armed with jagged spears and rusty blades, armor cobbled together from scrap and bone. Inigo shifted slightly and raised the rifle to his shoulder. 3 suppressed shots rang out. The first 2 kobolds dropped instantly, one with a hole clean through the chest, the other crumpling as a round tore through its eye. The third screamed, turning to flee, but Lyra was faster. Her arrow hissed through the dark, alighting with a flash of flame mid-flight, and struck the kobold in the spine. It toppled, engulfed in small dancing embers. Inigo glanced over his shoulder. Nice. Lyra nodded once, knocking another arrow. Your aim is frightening. They moved on. The tunnel split. One path dipped sharply downward, another veered left, reinforced by newer woodwork. Main nest is likely below, Inigo muttered. But this left passage might be storage or secondary patrol route. I'll cover the left, Lyra offered. Split and scout. No, we move as one. Clear left first. She gave a brief nod. As they stepped into the left tunnel, the ceiling grew lower, the air denser. Then, a sharp metallic snap echoed. Inigo grabbed Lyra and yanked her back, just as a pair of sharpened logs swung down from above, cleaving through the space they had just occupied. The impact splintered the wall beside them, throwing wood chips and dust everywhere. Lyra's breath hitched. I didn't see that. I did, Inigo said, eyes narrowed behind his visor. Barely. A crude tripwire, twine stretched between 2 floor pegs. He pulled a knife and sliced it clean, stepping over the mechanism. She nodded, brushing her cloak. Thanks. They continued down the hall. At the far end, a crude wooden door blocked their path. Muffled growls and the scrape of claws came from beyond it. Inigo held up a frag grenade and looked to Lyra. She nodded, backing into the shadows and drawing an arrow. Inigo pulled the pin. The grenade bounced once and rolled under the door. The hallway shook. Smoke and screams burst forth from the shattered door. Inigo charged in immediately, M4A1 barking like thunder. Kobolds, 6 of them, scrambled within a crude barracks. One lunged at him with a rusted sword. He dropped it with a shot to the chest. Another dove from a bunk above, and Inigo pivoted, catching it with a burst that stitched its torso in lead. Behind him, Lyra moved like a phantom, her arrows slicing the air with deadly accuracy. One kobold reeled from a flaming arrow to the shoulder, only to be struck down by a second bolt to the heart. Another raised a crude shield, snarling. Lyra shot beneath it, the wind-enchanted arrow snapping its knee backward with a sickening pop. They cleared the room in seconds. Lyra lowered her bow, chest rising with quiet breaths. Your reflexes, they're not human. Inigo ejected his spent mag and slapped a fresh one in. Let's say my training comes from somewhere different. Your bullets bend bone, she said, eyes still scanning the carnage. It's like you're dancing with death and dragging me with you. He cracked a grin. Wouldn't be the first time someone said that either. They pressed deeper. The tunnel opened into a wide cavern, a natural chamber with old mining tracks twisted through it. Stalactites hung from above like jagged teeth. And scattered across the floor were kobolds, 20 at least, stationed behind rock outcroppings and broken mine carts. At the center of it all, larger than the rest, stood the Alpha. Over 6 feet tall, covered in dark scale armor, and wielding a bone-carved staff humming with weak magical energy. The kobold chieftain snarled and raised its weapon, unleashing a shriek. Incoming! Inigo shouted, diving behind a stone pillar. Arrows and spells began to fly. Flashbang out! Inigo tossed the white grenade high over the battlefield. White light seared the cavern. Kobolds screeched, clutching at their eyes. Inigo emerged from cover like a storm, picking off disoriented enemies with deadly precision. Every trigger pull was a kill. Head, chest, heart. Kobolds fell before they could even regain their senses. Lyra dashed up the left incline, climbing onto a ledge. From there, her arrows rained down like fire and lightning, each one imbued with elemental force. A flame-tipped arrow struck a barrel of pitch and ignited it, throwing 3 kobolds into the air in a blaze of fire. A shaman began to chant in the rear. Inigo sighted in. One clean shot. The shaman's skull cracked like a melon, its spell dying in its throat. Kill the chief, Inigo called out. Lyra was already moving, sprinting from ledge to ledge. She loosed 3 arrows in succession. One missed, the next pierced the chieftain's shoulder, and the third struck its staff, snapping it in half. The kobold chief roared and charged. Inigo dropped his rifle, materializing his desert eagle and aiming true. Bang! The first shot staggered the beast. Bang! The second struck it in the chest, scales cracking. Bang! The third shot hit its knee, dropping it mid-charge. As it collapsed, Lyra leapt down from the ledge, spinning mid-air with a wind-charged arrow notched. She landed on one knee, point blank, and fired straight into its open mouth. The arrow exploded, taking the head clean off. Just the slow drip of water from the ceiling and the hiss of burning pitch. Inigo rose slowly, eyes sweeping the battlefield. Bodies littered the chamber. The mine was cleared. Lyra approached, her breathing heavy, eyes never leaving him. You, fight like no one I've ever seen, she said quietly. Inigo shrugged. Told you I could take care of myself. Her lips curved into a faint smile. You weren't lying. The walk back from the mine was quiet. Dust and ash clung to Inigo's boots, and a faint sheen of dried blood stained the cuff of his glove. Lyra walked beside him, her cloak torn near the hem, and her quiver noticeably lighter than when they arrived. The sun had risen higher in the sky, casting long beams through the trees and burning away the lingering mist. Neither spoke for a while. The silence wasn't awkward, just earned. A warrior's quiet. Inigo adjusted the strap across his chest, his rifle dematerialized and safely tucked away in his system. Slung at his side was a bloodied sack filled with kobold ears, a grim but necessary proof of their extermination. Lyra carried another, smaller satchel, containing the cracked remains of the chieftain's staff and its severed claws, trophies that would validate their claim. As Elandra's gates came into view over the hill, Lyra finally broke the silence. You fight like you've seen war. Inigo glanced at her. Not war. Something worse. But I learned to keep moving forward. Lyra nodded, accepting the answer without pressing. Still, I'm glad I went with you. He smirked. Changed your mind about bronze-ranked adventurers? I changed my mind about you. By the time they entered the Adventurers Guild, the hall was buzzing with its usual midday energy. New quests were posted. Old parties celebrated. The clatter of tankards and boots filled the air. But as soon as Inigo and Lyra stepped through the doors, heads turned. They were a sight, scuffed, battle-worn, and carrying the stench of blood and smoke. The murmurs started instantly. They actually went through with it. No way they came back alive. Inigo ignored them. Lyra did too. They approached the front desk where Elise was stationed, sifting through paperwork. Her eyes lifted the moment she heard Inigo's boots approach. "You're back," she said, genuinely surprised. Inigo dropped the bloodied sack onto the counter with a solid thump. "Job's done," he said. Kobold nest cleared. Chieftain eliminated. Lyra followed suit, placing her pouch next to his. "Here's the chieftain's remains, staff shards, claws, and what's left of his armor." Elise blinked, then slowly opened the sacks, carefully inspecting the contents. Kobold ears, charred talons, and the unmistakable curved claws of an alpha. "You actually did it," she murmured. "Told you we would," Inigo replied, voice casual. Elise looked up, gaze flicking between the two of them. "No injuries?" "None worth mentioning," Lyra answered calmly. Elise took a breath and reached under the counter for the mission ledger. She flipped through the pages until she reached the entry for the A-rank extermination quest. Her quill moved quickly, inking in the status, writing down the confirmation of a completed bounty. "Proof submitted," she said. "Confirmation pending, but I can already verify enough here to issue the base payout." She reached for a drawer and withdrew 2 heavy coin pouches. 2 gold coins. 30 silver. Base reward. "I'll issue an additional 15 silver for the chieftain's materials once the guild master finishes verifying the relics." She slid 1 pouch to Inigo, the other to Lyra. Inigo took his with a nod and a satisfied smirk. "Guess I'm eating well tonight." Lyra simply accepted hers in silence, slipping it into her belt pouch. "I'm going to need both of you to sign off on the official report," Elise added, pulling out a parchment. They did so quickly, Inigo with the same crisp script, Lyra with her elegant, practiced handwriting. As she pressed the final seal, Elise looked up again, this time softer. "You know, I wasn't expecting you to return." Inigo raised an eyebrow. "That makes 2 of us." Lyra offered a slight smile. "And yet here we are." "Yeah." Elise smiled faintly, but there was real warmth behind it. "And for the record, I'm glad you proved me wrong." Just then, a nearby group of adventurers who had been watching finally approached. One of them, a burly man with a battle axe strapped to his back, stepped forward. "You two took out the Kobold Alpha in East Hallow?" Inigo gave a lazy nod. "We did." The man gave a low whistle. "Damn. Respect." Others followed, nods of quiet approval passing between once doubtful faces. No more scoffs. No more dismissive whispers. They'd earned their place. After a few more nods and exchanged looks, the crowd dispersed. Inigo leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "So," he said, "that's how you get people to stop looking at your bronze badge." Elise rolled her eyes. "Don't let it get to your head." "I won't," he said. "I'll just let it sit there and inflate my ego for a while." Lyra, standing beside him, smirked. "You've earned it." Elise looked at her, then at Inigo. "Guildmaster's going to want to meet you both after this. He'll want a formal report, maybe even assign you follow-ups if anything else stirs near the mines. Tomorrow morning. He's in meetings for the rest of the day." Inigo nodded. "We'll be here." With that settled, he turned to Lyra. "Want to grab food? I still have half my gold left." She gave him a small, amused look. "You trying to buy my praise now?" "No, I'm trying to not eat alone." "Big difference." "Fine," she said, shaking her head slightly. "But next time I pick the place." They turned toward the doors, the warmth of the sun greeting them once again as they stepped back into the street, tired, hungry, but victorious. Now he earned a date with an elf. Elandra's twilight skies painted the cobblestones in hues of amber and rose. Lanterns flickered one by one as lamplighters made their evening rounds, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the cooler breeze from the nearby hills. The city was winding down, its pulse slowing with the setting sun. Inigo walked alongside Lyra, hands in his coat pockets, his steps matching hers as if they'd done this 100 times before. The sound of their boots echoed softly across the plaza stones, a rhythm that felt oddly peaceful. It wasn't a mission. It wasn't an ambush. It wasn't survival. "This way," Inigo said with a small nod, motioning toward a warmly lit building just past the plaza fountain. Vines clung to its brickwork facade, and the iron-wrought sign swayed gently above the door, La Farines. The same place he had brought Elise. But tonight felt different. Tonight wasn't about politics or reports. Lyra stopped just outside, eyes scanning the stained glass windows, the glow from within reflecting on her pale silver hair. "This place looks expensive." "It's not cheap," Inigo admitted, holding the door open for her. "But after what we just went through, I figured you deserve more than dry rations and reheated stew." She gave him a look, part amused, part reluctant, and stepped inside. The interior was just as he remembered. Candlelit chandeliers dangled from arched ceilings, soft violin music played in the background, and the air was thick with the aroma of roasted game, buttered root vegetables, and aged wine. A hostess led them to a private table near the corner, tucked beside a window draped in deep crimson curtains. They sat down, menus opening between them. Lyra took a moment to soak it all in, her gaze lingering on the polished wood, the velvet seat, the silver cutlery. Her hands looked out of place here, more used to gripping a bowstring than holding a wine glass. "You've been here before," she said finally. Inigo nodded. "Had dinner here a few nights ago. Figured you'd appreciate the quiet." She tilted her head. "With who?" "Elise," he said simply. "Guild paperwork." When the waiter arrived, Inigo ordered his usual, herb-crusted venison with forest glaze and a bottle of dry red. Lyra settled on the mushroom stew and freshly baked bread. Her usual sharp edge dulled somewhat in the candlelight. As their glasses were filled, Inigo lifted his drink. "To survival," he said. Lyra raised hers gently. "And to strange weapons and stranger men." They clinked with a soft chime. The first few minutes passed with small talk. What they thought of the city, the difference in food between here and the borderlands, how strange it was to sit at a real table after wading through a mine filled with blood and shattered stone. But eventually Lyra's gaze drifted. Out the window. Into memory. "I thought it would feel better," she said softly. Inigo lowered his fork. "The quest." She nodded. "Finishing it. Killing them. I thought it would give me something. Closure. Peace." Her voice trailed off. It didn't. He said nothing. Just waited. "I let myself believe she'd be there," Lyra continued, her voice low. "Somewhere in that mine. Caged. Shackled. Alive." Her fingers curled slightly around the stem of her glass. But there was nothing. No signs. No remains. Not even her pendant. Inigo leaned forward slightly, brows furrowing. "I noticed that too. The mine was blood and bones, but none of them were recent. They'd been living in that place for a while. But your cousin wasn't there." Lyra inhaled sharply. "Which means she's dead." Inigo held her gaze. "Yeah. No talk of slave trades or secret prisoners," he said firmly. "Those things kobolds, they don't trade. They don't barter. They kill and they feed. That mine was a den of monsters, not a camp." She nodded slowly. "I know, but you needed to see it for yourself." A long silence followed. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "She was always stronger than me, you know. Faster. Braver. I thought maybe if I could do what she couldn't, slay the ones who took her, maybe I'd understand why she didn't make it." Inigo studied her face. For once, she wasn't guarded. She wasn't cold or tactical. She was just a young woman with grief buried beneath her composure. "She would have been proud," he said. "That you faced them. That you made it out." Lyra looked away. Maybe. Another quiet moment passed, broken only by the soft clatter of plates as the waiter returned with their food. They ate in silence for a while, small bites, slow movements. The wine helped dull the edge, but the heaviness still lingered. Eventually, Lyra changed the subject. "You know, your weapons. I still don't fully understand them. That rifle you used in the cavern, it didn't just fire. It hunted." Inigo gave a half smile. "That's one way to describe it. I've never seen anyone move like that. Not a knight. Not a hunter. You didn't hesitate. You didn't aim. You just knew. Training," he said simply. "Lots of it. From where I came from, wars are fought at range. You learn to shoot before you learn to march." She tilted her head. "So you were a soldier?" He swirled the wine in his glass. "Something like that. You still haven't said where you're from." She arched a brow, clearly waiting. "Let's just say it's not a place you can find on any map." Lyra rolled her eyes. "Mysterious." "Of course." Inigo chuckled. "Would you believe me if I said I used to be a student?" Their plates were cleared and dessert was offered, berry tart and sweet wine. They stayed longer than either expected. When they finally stepped outside, the city had grown quieter still. Only the faint murmur of passing guards and distant laughter broke the silence. Lyra exhaled slowly. "Thank you for letting me pretend for a little while," she said, "that I wasn't just chasing ghosts." Inigo didn't reply immediately. He simply offered her his arm. She hesitated, then took it.